workforce.
So is the fact that the unemployment rate went higher actually a good sign for the economy in this case? Joining us right now is Douglas Holtz-Eakin, former CBO director and president of the American Action Forum, and our own Steve Leisman. Good to see you both. Doug, let me kick this off with you. How do you read the employment numbers today?
Well, I think in the end it didn't settle much. It was sort of a meh report, and, you know, if you came into it thinking the Fed should put on the brakes or not, you left thinking the same thing. If you came in thinking that, you know, the Fed was, or the government was too austere in its fiscal policy, you left probably thinking the same thing. And
right, but really, what do the numbers say about the economy and the jobs picture in your view? But putting the Fed aside.
We are just grinding along. There's really not a great recovery here, but we're showing no signs of failing. Even the labor force participation, if you dig inside that, that's largely the 16 to 19-year-olds. That's where the uptick was. That doesn't say the discouraged workers are coming back. And I think, you know, it's good news, but it's not great news.
What do you think, Steve?
You know, I think I'm going to come back here in a month and say one of two things. Either the 420,000 increase in the labor force was an aberration, just a one-off thing, or the beginning of a trend that some in the Federal Reserve expect to happen, which is going to create, in my opinion, an interesting investment thesis for investors out there. The idea has been for a while that if the job market improves, you could get this influx of workers into the workforce. Maria sort of alluded to that earlier. So you could be doing 175, 200,000, even north of 200,000 jobs on the payroll side, where the household side shows this influx of people who don't on an immediate basis get work. So what you would have is a rising unemployment rate with strong payroll growth that could stay the Fed's hand for quite a while, Maria.
And I want to see you in a month, Steve, because that's a story that many people have told. I actually was counting on that for quite some time. But there's increasing evidence that the long-term trend in labor force participation is just down.
Yeah,
the demography and the benefits and everything are going the other way.
I think, Doug, there's pretty good evidence on both sides that there is a secular decline in the labor force that's been going on for quite a while. But we also know there's been this huge reaction to the recession. And we don't know. Nobody's been through this because it was 70 years since we last had a trauma like this to the economy. We don't know. People get pushed out of the economy till they come back in.
But this is my point.
What about the temporary work part of the story?
That's a good sign.
There's a debate that, you know, we've got these jobs are not long-lasting. These are temporary jobs, 17 to 19-year-olds. So what does that tell you?
Or, Maria, usually it's a good sign. It's kind of axiomatic in economics. Temporary help leads to job, except with the Health Care Act, what we don't know, again, another thing we don't know is whether or not these temporary employment gains are employers bringing on workers and trying to avoid certain stipulations inside HCA.
What Steve is saying, because he's dead right, is that all of the rules for cyclical recovery are off because there are too many structural things going on in the economy. The health care reform is a very big structural change, probably not for the better from a pure growth point of view. You can debate the social policy merits elsewhere. We don't know how it's going to play out. We have structural changes in labor force participation. So we cannot get a very good read on the cyclical part in these month-to-month data, and everyone sort of spends a lot of time parsing the data probably too finely, desperate for an answer.
I mean, what's going to be important is you know, the timing of the taper. That's become part of the conversation as well. And I guess I would argue that today's report adds fuel to both sides. You know, it's just strong enough to those who say you don't have to taper anytime. You're going to start the tapering sooner rather than later, and then there are those who say no, this is not nearly strong enough. We need to hang on for another year or so at least. What do you think?
I agree with that. I mean, I think that was my basic point coming in, and the thing that would change it, quite frankly, is if you got some structural good news on the other side. Suppose you got a real tax reform that boosted growth, or you got a fundamental immigration reform that helped you with growth. So the Fed could look and say, yeah, those structural things are working for us. When we see good news, it allows us to exit. But we haven't seen that yet.
Bill, the most interesting thing about the report to me today was not the 175 and the 7.6. It was the way the market reacted. Stocks got a big pop and bonds got sold off. So you haven't seen those two things together. And it struck me that the market liked the growth and didn't care so much about the Fed. I'd really like to see that world where the Fed can go up or down, and it's not as critical to the market, because what's been happening, what would happen is the Fed stimulus would be replaced by actual economic growth.
Yeah, I mean, eventually good news. Eventually, good news will be good news.
I always think good news is good news. If people get jobs, it's good news, and I don't care what happens to the stock market.
Well, you'd make a lousy bond trader then.
I would be. I want people to work.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. We will see you later. And later, we will get